think about the other miracles you might have. In the think about when I was at Ann Arbor using the computer. It's almost, I hate to tell my kids, I tell my students, if you want to see punch cards, which I used as an undergrad, and as a grad, you have to go to this building. That really makes you feel old. But I had 3 boxes of cards I carried around with me. And the biggest thing is, don't drop them. Don't drop them. And they pushed them. And we, grad students, being of course the privileged people we are, we got the computer from 3 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning. And we dumped our cards in on one side, and then we walked around the other side, and then eventually a couple of hours later, some output will come churning out. And you look at it, and you make your corrections, and go back over and do it again. So you had this process. Today, I carry on this little laptop, which is about as big as my wallet, and it's got more power than that machine had, which was at the time, at least according to Ann Arbor in Michigan, the biggest and best machine in the world. I could do more things with it. Much more sophistication. And that little thing today cost me about $1,200. Whereas that big machine back in 1970 cost Michigan $6, $7, $8, $9 million. Again, a remarkable transformation. And think about all the others that you can see. In 1986 or so, cell phones were just becoming the craze. And indeed, nobody knew what they would look like, but they came back and to get the application permit them in an area, they were going to say, okay, the major telephone company, which at that time in here was South Central Bell, to become Bell South, and then to become essentially part of I guess AT&T again. It had one of the franchises. And then they were competing for another franchise. That is, you had other people competing. And they had to file applications with the FCC. And they were doing these studies, and they were, at that time, if they were taking surveys of people, would you use a cell phone? And of course, you had to explain what one was, what it looked like, what it could do. And then they were saying, look, we got this, we'll sell this to you for about $800. And then it's going to be about $750 a month. Well, most people said, I can probably do without. Okay, a few real estate people, a couple of lawyers, some sales reps said, yeah, it's a valuable business tool. Today, is there anybody that does have a cell phone? I mean, I was in New York with my daughter several years ago. We're walking through Battery Park, and some man laying on a bench, and I'm just looking at him. He looked homeless. His cell phone went off. Woke me up. Woke him up. But I looked and I thought, well, maybe New York has a policy. Nobody can be without a cell phone. I don't know. But it was, so now everybody has one. I mean, you take it, you're driving your car. How many people are using the phone? I would say too many too. You go down, you get out of class. Out of that sterling lecture by Gaines. What are the kids, the first thing they do? They pull out their cell phone. Then they're probably going to tell them their friends about the lecture, I'm sure. But it's the technology. As all this computer stuff was coming on board, people were talking about the digital divide. The system solved that before the government even knew what to do. And that's a neat thing about a market process. It solves itself very quickly in many cases. So you have this miracle of production. And it's, of course, based on, well, obviously, the resources that we were granted by the Creator, but our ability to use them. And our ability to use them very efficiently. So you have those miracles happening all the time. And we are, of course, now waiting on that miracle. What will replace oil and gas? Or will we just find more of it? How do we make other things into an energy product? And again, over time, that will happen. We've always found a way. So you got the faith, the miracles, then you have the issue of charity. And this is where, of course, I guess the famous the verse of Corinthians. Love, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. Pardon me. Faith, hope, and charity. And the most important one of these is charity. So the church has an obligation. And indeed, in some cases, again, not trying to make you into Methodist, but the church has a social affirmation that they put together. And they talk, and it says, we rejoice in every sign of God's kingdom, in the upholding of human dignity and community, in every expression of love, justice, and reconciliation, in each act of self-giving on behalf of others, in the abundance of God's gifts, entrusted to us that all may have enough, in all responsible use of earth's resources. Entrusted to us that all may have enough. And of course, being the dismal scientist I am, my first question is, what does that mean? And the preachers hate to see me coming and look on my face. What does that mean? That all may have enough. And I guess on that side of the coin, in our world as economists, there's no such system that cranks out a simple answer to what all will have enough. We crank out answers to, and the system, the process, cranks out answers to how many cookies will be produced any one day, but it doesn't say who's going to get them. It may churn out answers to how many cars will produce in a year, or how many pairs of blue jeans will produce in a year. But again, in terms of exactly who gets them, the answer is very simple. Those who produce. If you produce, you can get wherever you want. If you don't produce, there's nothing for you. Well, then the church says, wait, there are some examples of people perhaps in need. It could be a family loses a job. And I have to admit, from my Southern Baptist bringing up in San Antonio, one of the things the church did for members of the congregation, you had to be a member of the congregation, but if you fell on hard times,